And we are live.
Hi everyone. As always, give me just a few seconds to market this out as well as have people join in the stream. Me and Joe were just rambling off as many hand puns as we could before the stream started. So we are ready.
We were born to hand jive, baby.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this one. I think hands are one of the features that people struggle with the most. And I want to show you guys that it's not I mean, I still consider it challenging, but I think once you break it down into enough like parts, and then you can look at each part and be like, okay, I can handle this next step, I can handle this next step, then I think it becomes less intimidating. Because when you look at the hand and try to do it just from like nothing to the finished product, yeah, it does look very intimidating. So I'm going to hopefully kind of break it down a little bit for you guys. Okay, I think I am ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Nope, gotta do Facebook. And to those of you who are wondering about the hand in the promotion image, that is not an actual photo. That was a hand I drew, I think it was earlier last year. And it was for another hand exercise that I did last year, but I did a whole feature image kind of explaining how to draw the hands and how to look at the hand. And I'll show you guys that as well during the stream. All right, we are good to go. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Tim Von Rueden with ConceptCookie.com, and I'm joined by my moderator Joe Chico. Say hi.
Hello!
And today we are doing a live stream called, I think it's A Helping Hand. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how I go about shading the hand and how do I take it step by step from the initial line art. And this is the line art given to you guys from the latest exercise. It's exercise 31, and it's creature features, but the hand is also included in it. And I've been working pretty hard on finishing that exercise by Friday, so I'll show you guys my process on all 9 of the features. But today we're solely going to focus on the hand. And as always, if you have a question, feel free to ask it in the Q&A section. Joe is here to moderate and kind of pass me along the questions as you ask them, even if they don't pertain to what I'm working on specifically. And I want you guys to ask any questions, so even if they don't relate to the hand in general, because that's why we do these live streams. This is for me to kind of reach out to the Concept Cookie community and hopefully answer some questions, and hopefully you guys can pick up some tips and tricks that you can use in your own pieces of work. And then I guess, what were the announcements I wanted to tell you guys? I'll save them till the end, but just know we have a few things coming up on Concept Cookie. Joe and I have been working really hard on the YouTube page, so hopefully by tomorrow we'll have a full update and you guys can kind of see it in its clean new outline. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started right away. I'm going to share out. Okay, so this is the hand that I'm going to be working on today. Now the hand, let me bring in the... Okay, so the hand on the far left is the one I painted, and it was the one that I used in the promotional image for this live stream. But I also have a PSD, and I think it'll change if I do this. There we go. So here's what that hand started off as. And I wonder if I can even break it down some more. Yes, I can. Okay, so this was my base color here, and I had an outline somewhere. But pretty much I want you guys to see that it's just a lot of building up of colors, and I'm going to take you through what color palettes you should kind of adhere to for the different parts of like the tips of the fingers compared to the knuckles, compared to the top side of the palm. There's a very different medium of colors that kind of blend together. You can see as we scroll up here how the hand kind of slowly comes to life. So the other thing I want to kind of emphasize with hands is that you got to be patient, because hands are kind of tricky, and I think even drawing them without reference is like very, very tough and very challenging. So right out the gate, I want you guys to use reference. So for this image that I did with the on the far left, I took a picture of my own hand, and that's what I did. Well, actually, for all three of them, I just took a picture of my own hand, brought it into Photoshop, but I didn't just color right over it because that wouldn't actually teach me anything. That way, it's almost cheating yourself. So rather, I kind of hold the image side by side, and I look and I really observe at my hand, look at the different colors, and then things that I'd noticed I didn't really notice before is like my veins, when you see them on the hand, they almost come across as like a purple hue, and it shows through the outer skin layer a little bit. Where other areas, the veins, like in, I wonder if I can even, like right here, they become a little more green, more muddy looking, especially compared to like the vein that was up here that was more purple. So there's a lot of observational skills that you can kind of learn from just doing a pure life study and something as specific as a hand. All right, so let's get into our actual drawing here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, oops, let me get, I'll set up here. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer underneath of this line art layer. So this live stream isn't so much talking about how to draw the hands as it is to how to shade them. So in the actual, like, how to draw them, that's in another reference, and I think I have it pulled up. Hold on, let me see if I have it handily available. Hold on.
Really fast.
Yeah.
Is asking the book that you talked about about color in the face, and it is the Color and Light by James Gurney.
Correct. And I think every digital artist should have that book. So it's one that I recommend getting, even if, because it's not even that expensive. I think on Amazon it's like $20 or something. It's pretty cheap. All right, so here's the reference on, you can find this on Concept Cookie, the DeviantArt page, or even on the actual site under our references. But this is my kind of step-by-step on how to draw the hand. And I think there's some big things that I see a lot of young artists making. The biggest being the fingers are not like little mountains, little peaks. They're relatively the same size all the way up and from the tip of the finger to like the bottom to where the webbed area is. Which brings me into the second thing. You want to keep your fingers webbed in between each other. Because if you look at your fingers, they're attached, but you can kind of see how it's like midway up in between knuckle 1 and knuckle 2, where we assume that it starts webbing down here, but it actually kind of is like halfway between the first two knuckles. So I think that was one really big thing to keep in mind. And then the other thing was the hand's curve. So I think I see a lot now with digital artists that I look up to and what they do, separate the pinky from the middle two fingers. Especially when I see it drawn, or even if you take a look at your fingers and like try to make like a pose with it, you can see how generally the pinky kind of wants to be on its own. And I see that more often, and I see that the artists that are really confident with drawing hands, they usually like exaggerate and express their hands very like fluidly. I'm trying to think of like a better word to describe it, but it looks really great when you can feel confident in how to draw the hands, and you can play with different formations that the hands can make. But that's more so on how to draw the hands, so I'm going to show you guys how to shade in color. Let's see here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Alright, so first thing I'm going to do, make a new layer. I'm going to lay a base color underneath. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a new layer that's just for my color swatches. And I'll lay them out on the side here. First thing is the base color. And I'm not caring about if I'm going outside of the line art, because you'll see later on how I'm going to merge all my color layers and then erase all the excess, and then we'll hide the line art. So this is a process that I usually take. So then from here, then make another new layer. And the second color that I'm going to use is definitely more red. It's like a salmon color, if I do it a little bigger. And these colors I pulled from reference, because I want you guys feeling comfortable using reference and not feel like it's cheating. And I re-emphasize this almost every live stream, is the only thing that you're cheating is yourself if you're not using reference. So really be comfortable and confident in pulling up reference and using it on the side. Okay, so I was gonna just go on and lay out my colors, but I have to explain that I'm gonna have my light source kind of be kind of overhead, and it'll be, let me make a smaller arrow here. It'll be coming like from this general direction. Oops. So it'll be overhead, in front, and slightly to the left. It's kind of how I shade all my lighting scenarios. But the thing I'm going to watch for is like this first finger here is going to be casting a shadow on this finger, and I'll show you how you'll see some of the light behind it on the finger that's going behind the hand here. But that's more into the detailing things. But first, I really want to lay out a general base for my colors. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is with this pink, I'm going to lay it pretty heavily around the knuckle areas and kind of all the way to the tips of the fingers. Oh, and the other thing I guess I should talk about is I'm using a circle hard edge brush that has mix turned on, only the transfer is turned on. Play a little wrist up here.
We got some questions popping up.
Okay.
First one is from Yatzel. I think that's how you pronounce it. It says, "Do you use photography references in your pieces, or just improvise?"
Photography references in my pieces. I don't use them in my pieces, but I definitely reference from them, yes. Oh, let me close that. So usually, like even with some of the illustrations work that I'm doing now, there was one where I've been trying to finish it forever, but there was one with a boy that's sitting on a pier on a pond. I literally went to a park with my camera and I just took pictures of the nature. I took pictures of the way the light reflects on the pond, especially at the angle that I wanted. And I was looking for like low-hanging branches that like were just brushing on the skimming, kind of skimming the surface of the water. And I wanted to recreate that. And I think getting inspired and having that hands-on approach to it where you're literally not only seeing it, but then you feel it and you get to smell and hear the sounds around you. And that's where inspiration comes most for me, at least. And I think having that extra ammo kind of in your court, you'll create a better picture in the long run because you have more to work with. So that's why when people just blindly don't use reference, it's really just hurting yourself. And that's not to say that you should just steal exactly what the reference is. You should be inspired from it, and hopefully you can kind of pull different aspects of your different references to create something all your own. And now really quick, I'm going to pull in my second swatch color here. So it's like a slightly darker brown. Actually, I'm going to pull two colors. So I'm looking at my initial skin color here, and then I'm pulling a color that is a little less desaturated, or a little more desaturated, and lower on the value scale. And then I do that one more time for this brown. So I'm going to use those and make, I guess, a new layer for above this red layer here. So I'm going to use those for my area that are kind of in shadow that aren't more of this red pink hue. And I'm also looking at the way that the veins are kind of bumping out off of the hand, because then those will create not like intense cast shadows, but a cast shadow nonetheless.
All right. Question from Lily. "Hi Tim, I've been learning about subsurface scattering at the Mo, especially in the face. I've seen some artists do it in a way which almost gives a waxy effect, which I love, and I know it might not be correct exactly, but how can I really push the subsurface scattering?"
You know what? I just realized I did my my pink on the layer of my hand. I got to redo that part.
No.
I know, no, that's okay. I think the other big thing is not getting discouraged when something like this happens. So let me first grab my hand line art again, and then I will answer that question. Make it bigger. All right, so sorry, could you ask that one more time?
It says, "Hi Tim, I've been learning a lot about subsurface scattering at the moment, especially in the face. I've seen some artists do it in a way which almost gives that waxy effect, which I love, and I know it might not be correct exactly, but how can I really push that subsurface scattering?"
You know, with subsurface scattering, I don't really encourage too much on the face region because usually where you will see that most is like in the ears or like in the hands or areas where the skin's a little thinner. I would say with the nose, or maybe the nose might even get some, but for the most part, you won't see it as heavily. I guess if you maybe sent us an example, like just put it in the comment section and Joe will link to it because I'm kind of curious as what you mean by subsurface scattering, or if it's just like you're able to see the different colors beneath the top skin layer. And if that's the case, then yeah, I could definitely talk about that. But I want to make sure that's what you're asking for.
Really fast, what is the configuration of the main brush you are using?
So the brush that I'm using is a circle hard edge brush that has only transfer turned on, so it depends on how much pressure I'm putting on my tablet to give me that full effect, and there's no shape dynamics. So it's always going to be that circle radius. And then I have the opacity set at 100. So I mean, literally, this is like the basic of the basic brush. I'm going to try to play a little catch up here.
There's a couple of questions, but I'm not sure if we want to save those till the end. They're about the workshop and stuff about the website.
Oh, I guess really quick then, with the workshop, me and Joe and Wes have been working hard on the winter workshop, which will be announced most likely on Friday for registration. So if this is something that interests you or you really wanted to get into the fall workshop but wasn't able to just because of they filled up pretty fast, just know that I'm only opening this up to 15 students this time around instead of 25. And that's because I kind of found out that the workshop became more of a mentoring workshop where I was not so much teaching a general audience, I was literally specifically guiding these 26 students and looking at like what their strengths are and how I think they can kind of further their own personal skills. But that did take a lot of time, and I think what I want to kind of change the initial format of the workshop is to be more of like I'm helping individual people rather than it being a class. So I think that's why I wanted to limit it to only 15 this time around. And I'm looking forward to it. It should start in January. And like I said, we will be taking registrations on Friday, starting on Friday. So you'll probably see something about it tomorrow, and then we will get going. Oh, you know what then? Where is... Really quick, I want to share this with you guys. So here were the results. Here were 3 of the students' results from the workshop that I did. And what was one of their assignments was on the first week, draw a reference photo that I provide for them, and those are the pictures on the left. And then the pictures on the right were at week 5. So the progress between photo 1 and photo 2 was 5 weeks. So there were 3 students I really feel like made some leaps and bounds. And I always talk about for these workshops, some students will take a couple steps to the next level. Some students will take like a staircase, a flight up some stairs. And I definitely think Alex, who was the one that did this one, really grasped a lot of what I was trying to direct him into, and he was starting to understand values and how to lay down the difference between something looking blurry and something kind of accurately capturing values. So this was something that was kind of humbling as a teacher to really see that, like, it's getting through to them. And that's why I think I want to keep doing these workshops, because I can see the progress. I can literally see their growth as a student. So I'm hoping to get those again, and if that's something that interests you, yeah, stay tuned for on Friday. I will do the announcement.
That question was asked by Mark, so I hope he was paying attention.
Oh, I kind of ran with that one. Okay, now I'm going to grab those browns. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to do what I was talking about earlier.
Really quick, they want to know how you're changing the brush size on the fly.
Oh, yeah, this is one of the, I think every digital artist, this should be like the first thing they learn. All right, so on a Mac, and I believe on a PC, it's pretty similar. What you do is, so let's say I'm using my brush, and I want to make it bigger. On a Mac, you hold Control and Option, and then you click down on your tablet. If you move left to right, that'll change the size of your brush, and then if you go up and down, it'll change the hardness of your brush. I use this literally like every 10 seconds, because for my coloring process, it's all about eyedropper tool, picking up a color that's nearby, sizing, so I get the size that I want to kind of fill in my area, and then I do my brush strokes to shade and blend. And I repeat that process over and over and over again. And that's kind of my blending routine. And I think you guys will kind of see that you might jump into routines on how you shade things, and it'll make it a lot easier once you find that. So keep practicing and kind of figure out what is your kind of routine.
Another question. Today I bought the Eat Sheep art book. Where you participated as a concept artist. Will you participate in another video game like this?
I hope so, sometime in the future. I think with Eat Sheep, that was such a growing and learning experience. I loved it. I loved the team that I was working on. At the time, I was working with two of my close friends. One of my like best friends from art school. We got the same job at CG Cookie, and I got to work with her along with our other friend Paul Hoffner, who now works at Riot. And that experience of working on that game and being around concept artists, it was something that I'll never forget. So I would love to work on another game. Is the time right now? Definitely not, especially with the focus kind of being on teaching and I'm doing these workshops and these like these live streams and exercises and just making tutorials. So I think on my plate there's just too much for me to focus on making a video game. But that's something that we talked about at CG Cookie, and it's definitely not out of the question. We still want to do another project like that, even if it's not a game, even if it's like a short, like a movie, like a 10-minute movie. So yeah, I would love to kind of get back into the realm of doing real concept art and not teaching it. But thank you for buying the book, by the way.
We have a two-parter.
Okay, two-parter, go.
The faces you posted for the workshop are amazing. Will the winter workshop cover faces like this as well? I would love some mentorship in this area specifically. My job requires a lot of facial painting for realistic characters, which I struggle with.
Yeah, so the workshop, the week one assignment is to do your like very best at drawing a profile reference that I give you. So it will not be the same one because I don't want people kind of cheating or seeing like, because there's a whole tutorial I have about that specific image that only the people in the workshop got to see. So I'm going to keep that kind of specifically for them. But what I will do is have a new photo that I will take of someone that I know, and I'll kind of garner them with some different textures and materials so that you get a range of not only doing skin and hair and the facial features, but including, like for the one I did, I had like a glitter headband, I had some feathers, and I had a leather strap. So I'll probably incorporate similar items and then work with you on how to draw those specifically. So yes, there will be something with features, or profiles, I should say.
And then the second part to that is, where will the workshop be announced? Concept Cookies Tumblr, Facebook, or the main site? Just to be prepared.
Every single one you just mentioned. I know I was making the marketing images for it yesterday, or no, on Monday? Monday, and getting excited again. Like I'm finally falling into liking teaching, and I think it took a workshop for me to work more on an individual basis with people and seeing their growth and being able to understand what they need to do or to take their skill level to the next level. So I think it's been a cool ride, and I'm excited to get it started again. And Joe will be my moderator. He was very helpful for me for the first workshop, so he's another great artist that will be along my side helping you guys. Okay, I'm almost to the point where I want to get rid of this line art because I'm finding it to be distracting now. So if you are like me and you like doing more of a realistic touch to your pieces where you don't like line art, you just like the different features to be separated through contrast, kind of like in real life. So this is definitely in more of a realism realm, but you see it a lot with like animation houses these days, and definitely with video game art, you just see a lot of just contrast use rather than line art use. Not to say one's better than the other. For me, it's just personal preference. I like to use contrast more so than line art. All right, so you can see when I turn off my line art layer, it's still a little. So what I need to do is erase all the excess that's like here and just get that out of there, because then from this point forward we can mask out everything. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to first make a folder, duplicate all these layers.
Really fast.
Yes.
ZMEFTW is. I'm currently in school. Is the winter workshop something I could attend?
This is just something I talked about with Wes for a long time, where if you really feel you can't dedicate 5 weeks to the workshop and you feel like you'd kind of be pushing between your schoolwork or your life where like maybe this isn't the right time, then I would hold off. But if you feel like, this is a good time where I can really dedicate these 5 weeks to bettering my skill level, then yes, absolutely. But just know the homework assignments I give usually require like 4 to 8 hours a week. And I think that's another thing that I'll make mention in the post is like there were about, I want to say 10 students that I had in the last workshop that they usually would turn it in late just because they had other things, but they were so thankful for the workshop that they definitely don't regret that they didn't have the time for it. And they did eventually finish it. But I want you guys to kind of become used to having deadlines and hitting those deadlines. Because I think in this industry, that's something being efficient and what's that word, Joe? What is that? Punctual is so important. And that's something else I want to teach. So I'm not only teaching you guys how to become better observers and how to see how to draw anything, but I want you guys to become more professional in the way that you work. So it's funny because when I first got my job at CG Cookie and we were looking to hire on another person, it was very clear to me how something as simple as not responding to an email within like 72 hours says a lot to the employer. So I guess a tip right here for you guys, if you are looking to kind of get onto a AAA video game company or an animation studio, please respond to your emails immediately. That shows a lot about you as a person and as a worker. And it shows that you are dedicated to it and you're not just putting things off. Okay, so now that I used my eraser tool and I got pretty much all the erasing done, I'm going to hide my line art layer. So you can see how there's still some areas that are a little sketchy, so why don't we go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer, hide that one. Get my eraser tool on here. Maybe I'll zoom in just once. Or you want, no, I'm not going to zoom in once at all during this entire piece. Because the other thing I want you guys to become more familiar with is working from a distance, and that you don't need to zoom in to complete a piece of work, and that usually you become a lot faster in your pieces when you don't zoom in.
Do you know the difference between a character illustration versus a concept illustration for a character? Or is it the same thing? That's asked by Christopher.
So I think the difference is the difference between concept art and illustration. Where for the longest time I thought I was a concept artist, but the more that I kind of really realized what the difference is, I'm definitely an illustrator. I'm not a concept artist so much. So the difference is a concept artist will create really quick sketches, concepts of a character where they'll be like really rough. They'll be super fast and they'll get the idea of what the character will look like. An illustrator will take the concept and like flesh it out and give it some beautiful rendering work and give it the different lighting scenarios and give it a few different. Oh, this even goes back to a concept artist where once a concept artist has like, you know what, this would be easier if I just do a little sketch. So like initial concept art might be like silhouette worthy. And then let's say that we had, okay, so here's my standing character. I don't like that pose. All right, so here's my initial character. So imagine from here, if I cleaned it up, I gave it some line work, but it was still very quick and sketchy. But then from here, I might lay down some color palettes depending on what they are. So if they were like a warrior and they had like a cape or something, and there was a giant sword, I don't know what it would be, but then they would probably be the ones that add different color palettes to it. So they might try like, what if the cape was red? What if the cape was green? What if it was blue? What does this color say about the character? What are they trying to represent? Are they from a kingdom? Are they a villain? So there's a lot of things that come up during the concept stage. And that's usually a lot of active thinking too. Where an illustrator, their active thinking is different. They're not so much thinking about what can I do to create the character. Their thoughts are, what can I do to fully illustrate and depict this character in the best light. So then they'll think about different lighting scenarios. They'll think of the dynamics of the angle that the pose that you're doing it in. The pose can say a lot about your character too. And that's the stuff that an illustrator will think about. So there's definitely a difference, and I think you'll kind of figure out along the way as you do your work which one you kind of fall into. And that's it. That's my rant.
We have a question about how to draw like a basic how to draw a head, and it's like in three different sections. So I kind of have to figure out which one's the first one. Um, Starts off with that one, and then says
I feel like
using
this would be a live stream all its own.
what?
I feel like this would be a live stream all its own.
Yeah. Using the circle starting method of heads, I've been seeing various artists use the horizontal line in different ways. Firstly, they vary from drawing it one one third from the bottom or one fourth from the bottom. Secondly, they vary between using for the brow line center of the eye, or some artists draw the eyes above the line. Are there reasons or theories for choosing these proportions or positions? Thanks.
Okay, I know what the second one's all about. So you're talking about, okay, here's my head. So then usually from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, I should lay about halfway between. And that's a rule I generally do follow. But there are some artists that will either put them a little above the line or a little below. And I think that comes down to a style choice. It's kind of the difference between like a Naughty Dog character. So like Nathan Drake won't look like a Final Fantasy character. Where Final Fantasy characters usually have not as sharp chins, they're softer features. And that's where it comes more into what style you're trying to fit and adhere to. So in this case, I guess general rule, yeah, the eye should fall about halfway from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin. So then what was the first part? That was the one I missed.
Using the circle starting method of heads, I've seen various. Just moved. Where'd it
Like,
go? There it is. I've seen various artists use the horizontal line in different ways. Firstly, they vary from drawing it one third from bottom or one fourth from bottom.
one fourth from bottom. Wait, select it so I can see it on the side.
All right.
Firstly, they vary from drawing a third from the bottom or a fourth from bottom. I'm not even sure what they're saying. Use the horizontal line in different ways. Firstly, they vary from drawing. Oh, are they talking like from the bottom of the chin? Oh, no, that doesn't make. Oh, the circle. Uh, I guess there's different ways you can go about doing. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about with starting method of doing heads. Pretty much when I draw my head, I think of a sphere. I think of the 3D shape or the space that it's in. If the eyes I want to be looking in this general direction, I'll put a center line down the head. Imagine if this was like behind the head, because it will go around the entire head. And then I lay 2 lines on either side kind of represent the front of the face. So then I extend that line, that initial line, down the front of the face. And then if this was the neck, oops, let's do a natural pose. And if it was male, I'd make the chin more sharp. And then I think about where they're looking, and then I do that center line. So from the top of the forehead to the bottom of the chin, the eyes would rest right about here. And that's where I can kind of know where my eyes would go. Now, just know though, when I draw heads nowadays, I skip all the initial steps. I kind of go right into the eye placement or I usually lay out the outline of the head first, but I don't like draw this perfect sphere. I don't draw middle lines as much, where you become more comfortable, and it's almost like patterns, like muscle memory. So it's like when you play the piano, you don't, constantly have to look at the notes. You already know which notes to hit. So then that's usually a good rhythm to get into. So practice drawing heads enough to the point where you don't even have to think about how do I start heads. You already just know exactly what you need to do. All right, so I'm using this darker brown color. Let me show you what I've been doing. So I've been just edging out the shadows that would be kind of formed on the other side of the fingers where the light's not hitting quite as strong. And it's giving us that nice three-dimensional look to the hand. So I want to keep playing with that as much as I can.
Chicago Storm 88 says, I'm working in a piece right now that has 3 hands in it. I'm trying to apply special effects to them. One has a mossy look, and the other looks more zombie-ish. I have a hard time trying to make it look natural, even with references of moss and zombie flesh.
I guess in that case, you might want to, if you could even just send a JPEG through the chat or like upload it to Imgur or something, send it over. Because sometimes it's easier for me to show rather than tell, and I can kind of give you advice that way. But usually you should be able to like look at reference and be like, okay, if I want more of a zombie-like hand, I'm going to look at references of zombies, look at gore, look at the way its skin. Sometimes this can get a little disturbing when you Google search like ripped flesh. But if you want a more realistic, reference, that's what you got to look at. And then really look at the different colors. Look at the way the muscle flesh, when it's exposed, the color of it and how it reflects light. I mean, you get into a little more of like gross things, but it creates a more realistic, accurate depiction. It's kind of like when, the masters went and drew dead bodies, and when the doctors were dissecting them, and they would literally just sit there and draw the different muscle structures and how they formed, because they didn't have the internet. But now we have the kind of ease, convenience of the internet just to look it up really quick.
Looking at dead bodies from the luxury of your own home.
I would say it's handy, Joe.
That, or you can look up like animals, like cows and stuff like that, or like pieces of chicken, like how chicken kind of like when it's cooked, like how it rips apart and stuff.
Yeah. All right, now I'm going to work up this nail. And I think a lot of you, or I won't say a lot. A few of you have asked me over the years how to draw a nail accurately. These are tricky, admittedly. You would think they would be simpler, but they're not. So let me go ahead. I'm gonna mask out this area. So now for a fingernail, I use, oops, let me grab where are my color swatches. So it's usually a little more pinkish, but it's like a desaturated pink. And I use that for my nail colors. So now if you look at your own fingernail, you can kind of see how there's a little pinkish to it, but sometimes there'll be like this little white hump. I might even zoom in, not because I have to, but because I really want you guys to see this. So, okay, this was my nail. There's generally a little, and I'll add it to my color swatch as well, but there's usually a lighter pink area that's like right, oops, that's too saturated. Hold on. Like right about there. There we go. So it's usually right about here, and it kind of forms like this, not even a half circle, it's like a third of a circle. And then usually there's some gradient going on where it's a little darker near the base and then gets a little lighter. And at the very nail part, you usually get like that white line. I'm going to zoom back out because when you get so close to detail, sometimes it'll throw off the entire piece if you have like one area that's like super detailed, and it definitely distracts from the rest of the piece. So now let's see if I can recreate that at this very, very weird angle that I'm looking at the forefinger nail. Oop. Gotta make sure I turn off my phone. There we go. Okay, so immediately I can tell, nope, that's not looking right. I gotta redo it. The nail should be a little higher because if this is the first knuckle, here's the second knuckle, and the third, oh no, first, yeah, so then the nail would rest just under that third one. To about there. And since the angle that we're looking at it, typically you won't see the skin. I mean, depending on how short or long the person's nail is, but for the most part, we probably won't see the skin. Okay, now I'm going to grab my lighter color. And mind you, since we're in shadow, I'm not going to fully apply these lighter colors. Something like that. All right, and there's no really other nail in this scene, so I'm going to keep going on with my detailing. Because you can tell just overall it looks still very rough. Well, not very rough, but rough enough to a point where I need to start getting into the cleanup stage. So then that's what I'm going to do now. And this would be a perfect time for more questions.
All right. Next question from Furman. Hi, when I draw people from observation, most of the time my outcome will look cartoony, but my goal is to make the drawing realistic, or as close to the subject. Any tips to overcome this? Thanks.
I guess, Joe, this would be a good one for you, since you did kind of specialize in this.
Oh man. My recommendation for this would to be look at master studies a lot of the time, and um, I end up drawing cartoony too because of like I used to draw anime and stuff like that all the time. So my portions got out of whack, and then I started studying from people who worked at Pixar and all that jazz. Um, but recently, I just picked up reference images, and I would try to draw that as close as possible. And I mean, there are tons and tons of books on anatomy and like how to look at things and draw it realistically, as opposed to all those how to draw books that they have on the bookshelves and whatnot. Study from photography, things like that. Um, but you have to try to trick your hand and your mind into trying to draw exactly what you're seeing as opposed to what you're thinking, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's perfect. Because I think too often we think, oh, I know what an eye looks like, and you kind of, even though there's reference in front of you, you overlook specific features about the eye, or like you might not see an inner eyelid, or you might not see the things that are right in front of you just because your visual eye already thinks it knows. So then it'll go off what it already knows. So it's kind of a challenge for yourself to be like, no, I really have to observe, not only just observe, but analyze the different structures, especially if you say your faces turn out a little more cartoonish. So like, what about them? And like really almost be critical on yourself. So like, what about them looks cartoony? Figure out like, oh, maybe their mouths are too wide. And then you start to learn, okay, well, the mouth, usually the corners of the mouth don't go past the irises of the eye or the pupils of the eye if you line them up from a straightforward view. So then kind of looking at different like little tips and tidbits like that and applying it to your work and being like, okay, now does this follow accuracy? Because usually things look more cartoony just purely based on accuracy.
And don't be lazy.
Yeah, draw every day and like really challenge yourself. So don't just draw and like recycle your own skill level, but like challenge yourself and kind of work to get better.
Yeah, because I know that's what a lot of people struggle with is they'll do like they're so used to drawing like an anime thing that they really haven't taken the time to dissect realistic anatomy in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
I fully agree. And even if you are like an animator or like you're an artist that kind of specializes in exaggerating proportions, or even if you work at a animation studio, I think it's important to learn real life or realism first, and then be able to apply that to your exaggeration or your proportions or anything that might that can apply, because you can take away a lot from learning realism. Even
Yeah.
though I know for a lot of people it's kind of a pain because they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to do cartoons and stuff.
Yeah.
Trust me, especially the people that I've talked to, it does help.
The look up artists like Mark Behem, Behm, and Tyson Murphy. Those guys are extremely good at doing like cartoony, but their rendering skills are so well because they've studied from life.
hmm I love Tyson. All right, here's a good example of where my shadow colors are a little inconsistent. So here, there's a shadow color. So this is right here. And then here, it's about this. So I want these to be a little more similar because they're receiving about the same amount of light. I'm going to darken this area. And then this just comes from being able to look at your piece and be able to really analyze it. And like, what is off about this, and then be able to fix it. And you can see how I've not really gotten to fine detailing it. I'm still kind of trying to lay out a really solid foundation that I feel comfortable continuing with. Because I don't want to draw on like the knuckle hairs or the wrinkles on the palm until I get a solid foundation. Because I think people jump into detail too soon. But you really kind of have to challenge yourself not to do that.
I just sent you over Skype the link from the person sent out.
The zombie one?
Chicago Storm 88. I think that was the zombie one. Yeah, that was the zombie one.
Okay. I'm going to keep pushing forward a little further on this because I know we're already at the 50-minute mark.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of questions about website stuff. So, do you want me to save those for the end, like the last 5 minutes or so?
I guess this might be another one of those live streams that go over our mark. Maybe this will be a half hour over, I think. Because I really want to show like a finished hand by the end of the stream.
All right.
So I guess, yeah, ask the ones that kind of pertain to something that would be answered without having to kind of get away from me drawing this hand.
All right. Just started with Photoshop CS6. Already got a way come into us, but I suck at getting straight, smooth lines. How does one do this with Photoshop? I mean, there is a smoothing checkbox, but it does not work that great.
Unfortunately, Photoshop doesn't have the smoothing feature yet. And I think we talked about this, or I talk about this a lot, where there's other softwares that have a mathematical line smoothing feature built in. So like this line that I just created, in softwares like I think it's Mischief and Paint Tool Sci. I'm not sure if Corel Painter has it, but they have not lazy brush. What's that called?
Stabilizer.
Stabilizer. So like this line right here, it would be smoothed out because it averages. So like see all these little grooves, those would not even be there. You wouldn't. It would be smoothed out. But Photoshop, unfortunately, right now, does not have that feature built in, which is a little disappointing, but I definitely think I will see it in their next patch or whatever their next update would be just because of how many people request it. But if you're using a PC, there is something you can download called Lazy Nuzumi, I think it's called, and it is that line feature, the line smoothing feature. So you're able to do it. Where since I have a Mac and I've kind of only worked on Macs, I cannot use that. So that's, I think, also kind of pushed me to further my rendering skills rather than my line art skills because I don't have a smoothing feature and I'm not confident enough in my line work where I can feel confident doing just like straight, smooth, curved lines where my strength kind of lies more into the rendering and the smoothing ability. So that's another thing where I want you guys to start being able to recognize your strengths and weaknesses. Where I think too much we harp on ourselves where we're always like, oh, I suck. Or it's like, I've heard too many people be like, I'm just not good. I'm just a terrible artist, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, okay. One, you got to stop, get that negative attitude out of here because then you're working out of a place of fear and you're like, you won't actually cater to your strengths as much because you're so focused on what you're not good at, your weaknesses. Where I think it's good to at least recognize what your strengths are and play those up, but also recognize what your weaknesses are and be able to work with them, which sounds kind of weird, but you have to work with your weaknesses as well. So one, you want to work on improving them, but two, like for me, I know I'm not good at line art, so that's not going to be the focus of my work. My focus is going to be my strengths, but then in my spare time, I'm going to be working on my line art. So that's why I usually keep a pen and paper, or not a pen, a pencil in my sketchbook always around, and I usually try to sketch at least once a day, where now I've gotten it, this past week I've been in a good habit where every day I spend about 5 to 10 minutes just doing a little doodle, because you do need those skills too, and I want to work on them. So I think that's important. What was the first part of this question? I completely lost myself.
They were just wondering if there was the option to make it
Oh,
more.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Like how to make it more smooth.
So as of now, no, not in Photoshop,
Yeah.
unless if you're a PC user.
Jared Brunner says Tyson Murphy is a friend of mine. Also, Google Joe Olson as well for some great stylized characters.
Hmm. Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean there are tons of good, like amazing guys out there, like Corey Loftus. Just a lot
Hmm.
of unsung heroes too. You know.
Well, actually, if he's a friend of Tyson, please tell him he's doing a great job. And my gratitude, because I really do follow his work religiously. Okay, now I'm ready for some more detailing. So now I'm going to get more into like highlight stuff. So this goes into number 5. So I'm going to grab my initial skin color again, but make it a lot lighter on my value scale. Oops, let me put it on my color swatch layer. 5. So this is what you'll usually start to really push and round it out. So I want to lay this out selectively and consciously of where I'm laying out these highlights. So I'm looking at the thumb. I know that the light's coming from overhead. The thumb usually has these pretty two big wrinkles near the knuckle, and it's going to kind of slim out near the end. Then on the actual nail, it'll usually be broken up because if you don't get your nails filed, and I'm assuming if you're male, you probably don't, so your nails are like mine where they're just like they're very bumpy and they're ridgy. And like a little detail like that and laying it on your nail can really help out the realism sense of it. Where sometimes just making it completely smooth is kind of overlooking something that could be kind of cool to depict. We'll grab some highlights here, but now this is where I think a lot of, or not, sorry, I keep saying a lot, where someone specifically asked me how to draw the highlights on the vein parts that are pushing up on the skin. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to look at where the vein is pushing up against the skin. I'm going to just very lightly brush a highlight on the side that is receiving the light. And what's cool is if you really look at if you really like study veins and the way that they wrap around our bones and especially in our hands, it's very weird. It looks very strange. But there's one that usually wraps around the knuckle area, like right in front of it. So I usually like to depict that, maybe not that far, but just enough where it gives indentation to a vein. There's little nuances that show the imperfections on the hand, or not even imperfections, just how organic the hand really is. I think says a lot about the artist, how they really depicted the hand in like a realistic light. I'll just keep doing the highlights if we want to do another question, if there is one.
All right. I believe it's Kupo. Hi. I'm mostly okay with drawing organic stuff, but I struggle with drawing things like vehicles, guns, or robots. Do you have any recommendations on how to tackle this? I had enough drawing kaijus. I want to draw some Jaegers.
um, I won't give my opinion on Pacific Rim, but I do agree with you where I feel very confident in organics, but when it comes to hard surface or things that aren't non-organic, I do feel like I struggle a little bit because you have to be a lot more precise, and it needs to look machine-made. And there's a big difference from something looking organic or man-made and something looking machine-made. So it's machine-made, you have to make sure it is sleek, it is tight, it is like on point. Because if there's like a wavy area on an edge that should not be wavy, it immediately throws off the entire illusion of what you're trying to create. So it is difficult, and I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it. It is difficult, but for some people, it's super easy. Where the opposite's true. Like for them, doing organic stuff is like the hardest thing to imagine. So just know if you jump into it and you're not comfortable right away, just know it takes some practice, and you're probably so used to doing organics that your mind is kind of working in a way. It's like working on autopilot on how you would do organics. But you kind of have to change the way you look at it and the way you look at the process of creating it. So work with a lot of hard edges, work with a lot of masking tools, and you should be able to get it.
And look at a lot of cars.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, reference is huge. Really, really, really look at reference. Look at hinges. Look at look at the functionality. Because I think sometimes when people do hard surface stuff or like robots, if they don't look at like the practicality or the functionality of it, sometimes it just falls apart immediately in my head where I'm like, I'm not buying it. Even though I'm not a hard surface artist, like I can definitely tell the difference of something that looks practical and something that looks like it was just aesthetically given. So definitely work hard on making it make sense too.
Okay. This this question. Oh, actually. Oh, this is a really fast question. Sorry for joining late. How do you flip the views of all your layers at once?
How do I what?
How do you flip the view of all of your layers at once? So I'm guessing that they mean like if you're
Oh,
flipping it to horizontal or you're flipping
so
horizontally.
yeah, so for me it's a keyboard shortcut. I have it set as Command Q. But on your top menu bar, it's image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. I actually do recommend putting that as a keyboard shortcut because I use that all the time. I can't stress enough how important that is. Because then you get to see it from a different view where something that might look right from one perspective looks completely off in a different perspective. All right, so really quick, I'm using this purple color, and I'm going to lightly touch on areas on the hand where like the veins are a little closer to the surface. So I'm going to lay out this purple just a little bit. And that this just touch of color adds so much to the piece that wasn't there before. And I'll do a before and after to show you what I mean. And I'm also going to add in one other color as well.
All right, this question has been here for quite a while.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question about CG Cookie. I want to become a citizen for all the tutorials and such, but I'm kind of confused. After paying, do I get unlimited access to all the tutorials and resources of the CG Cookie site? Sorry if it's obvious or something.
No, that's okay. And yes, you get access to not only Concept Cookie, but Blender Cookie, Max Cookie, Unity Cookie, Sculpt Cookie, and you have access to the entire database. So that's why we try not to just be like a single platform. Like we're not just teaching Blender, we're not just teaching concept art. We're trying to teach the entire spectrum of what digital art kind of encompasses nowadays. Okay, I'll probably shade for like another 10 minutes, and then we'll get into the final questions along with the website stuff that you were talking about. You can see here now I'm making my brush size a lot smaller. And you know what? I think I'm going to finally switch to my skin brush. All right, so this is the skin brush. So it's one of the brushes you can download on Concept Cookie. I believe it's a citizen brush though. And I think what I want to do is kind of give the skin a bit more of a texture to it. So you know what? I might even change this to a multiply layer. Make it a little bigger. You can see how some of that porous texture comes through if I lay on this brush really, really softly. And if it does become a little too much, I can always turn the layer's opacity down, which I probably kind of plan on. And I'm going to do the same with an overlay layer. I'm going to do it very soft because I think I catch myself using overlay and multiply layers as like a crutch. So I'm going to lay this on lightly and I'm going to turn the opacity down.
I have a question from Shauna again. It says, about realistic faces versus cartoony faces, any tips on finding a middle ground between the two? I tend to think ultra realism is a bit stilted and it can be boring, but I don't want my artwork to look cartoony or anime either. I find it hard to find a balance.
Yeah, I definitely think there are a bunch of artists out there that I follow that I kind of feel fall in that middle ground that you're talking about. So I would look for those artists and kind of study what they do. What do they do to pull the proportions in a way that's not cartoony, but at the same time isn't realistic? Because then when you can kind of see what other people start doing, you can like kind of look at your own style and look at like, okay, what am I doing that they're doing differently? And then be able to kind of play on adding what they add differently to your own work, and then hopefully that will add that sense that you're looking for.
Yetzel asks, if this weren't an hour live stream, how long does it take you to finish that hand?
Um, in all honesty, I would have already been done because usually when I'm answering questions, I think my mind only works at like 70% capacity when drawing, where if I had 100%, I'd probably already be done. And I think I'd just say that I've drawn hands so many times that I kind of know like what areas take me longer compared to what I can usually whip through a little faster. So typically probably under an hour is how long this hand should take me.
Is there any workshop or are there any workshops for landscape paintings?
Not that I'm teaching, but I'm sure at like CGMA there's got to be an environment type workshop that would interest you. All right, here's a good example that I kind of want to focus on of where contrast can add more than a shadow. So like you can see in this like crack area right here where the thumb is kind of creating a wrinkle from the forefinger. I'm going to choose this lighter skin color and I'm going to slight or just kind of brush up the shading right up against that shadow. And that contrast will create the illusion that the area in the foreground is closer. And I like that. I like that feeling. So here's before and after. Where sometimes we rely on shadows so much to create the illusion of depth, but you can do it with contrast just as well, if not, in my opinion, better. Where I think it's a lot more realistic to do it with contrast rather than with a shadow on either side.
Christopher asks, is there a link for info on the 5-week course?
Yes and no. So the one that's coming out, or at least the registration page for the winter one, won't be out until Friday. But I do have a post about the fall one and what the guidelines for that one was, which I think, Joe, if you can find that really quick. Are you allowed to post comments?
I can't.
On Concept Cookie's main website, just type in workshop. You know what? I'm going to double check that to make sure I'm not leading you down a dark hole. Yeah, so if you just type in workshop in the Concept Cookie search, the first thing is the workshop I Can Draw Anything. And that gives you kind of an intro video and kind of an overview of what I wanted to teach for the fall one. It'll be a little different for the winter because, like I said, I want it to be more of like a mentorship type program. But that'll give you kind of the overview of what the topics we'll be covering. Okay, I'm really liking how these shadows are coming out now. We're a lot more soft. Where let me show you the difference before and after. Oops. Alright, so here's my hand before we did all the detailing and cleanup, and then here's the hand after. So I'm really starting to dig where this is going. So the one last thing I'm going to do before we kind of cut off the stream, I actually kind of a little faster than I thought I would with the detailing part. Sometimes you don't know, like even though I say I should get this done within an hour, sometimes you have one of those days where you're having like an art block where things aren't falling into place like they normally do, or you're feeling frustrated that your work's not doing something that you've done before a bunch of times, and you're like, why? What's going on? So some days I will say it does take me a little longer to do stuff that should typically take me shorter. So it does kind of depend on the day as well.
L'Oreal asks, some videos and comments earlier this year mentioned learning paths. Is this feature still coming, or was the idea abandoned?
Nope, that's still coming. Actually, me and Joe just worked out the first learning path that will be on Concept Cookie. And it'll be kind of taking where the Getting Started series left off and then where you go from there. Because we've gotten a lot of, or at least I get a lot of help desk questions where it's asking, okay, I finished this, where do I go from here? Where like I feel like I'm on the right path, but I don't know, or after getting on the Getting Started was a good first step, but now like what's the next step? And usually we would just direct them to the different exercises we have because that's a good way to look at your work and improve it. But I think you guys want a little more direction. So we're going to give that to you, and hopefully that'll be one of the first things of 2015 that we finish and get out.
When you go from line art to adding color, do you do it on the same layer? If not, then what should be the blending mode on the new color layer?
Normal. I take out the line art layer completely. Like here's my line art layer. So it's still there, I just hide it. So I get to a point in my shading process where I don't need it anymore. So rather than draw over it, I just take out the layer completely.
Louise Hampson says, how do you mask a layer? I tried it the other day and completely failed.
We do have a full tip on it on Concept Cookie, but I almost wanted to direct you to that. Or you know what? I guess I could share my screen. Hold on. Because this I could do really quick. All right, do you see my screen?
No, we still see your handsome face.
Where's my desktop? There we go. Okay. So, sorry about the infinity.
Oh, no, you're good.
All right, so to make a new layer and have it masked out, what I'm going to do, make a new layer. From here, I want to select only the hand. So I only want to draw inside of this hand area. So I'm going to hold Command on a Mac, and I believe it's Control on a PC. And I'm going to click the layer that has just the hand. Now I want to make sure I click the actual image with the gray and white checkered boxes in the background. And from there we should get a marching ant selection tool around the hand, so the area that we selected. And then at the very bottom here, there's a box with a circle in the middle. You just click it. So now what that did is it created a mask. But at first, you're only working on the mask layer. So I want to switch to the gray and white checkered. So I click on that, make sure I have like the white corners on it, and then I can work only in the hand. So that's one way to mask it out. There's also a quick way to do it, and I want to show you that as well. So the quick way to do it, and I always mask it out just because I know then when I quickly look over at like what layers are masked. But the other way to do it is you make a new layer, and then let me make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, so you hold Option on a Mac, and I believe it's Alt on a PC, and you click in between the two layers. So now this layer has like a quick mask on the hand, and I see a lot of people using this, but for me, I don't know if it's just because of the way I was taught, where I'm so used to doing that way of masking it out, and then I can see that this layer is a mask, because sometimes that little arrow, it's not visually enough for me to recognize that it's a mask, layer mask.
Also, if you right-click on that image, on the copy below, and then there should be, or no, not on the checker, but the actual layer, yeah, and then create clipping mask.
Oh yeah, that'll do the option
Yeah,
one.
you have to make the layer first though.
Actually, I'm gonna make these knuckles a little more vibrant, just a touch. Okay, so this is kind of the way I would go about drawing hands. And from here, I'd probably get into the little details of like drawing. And you know what? Maybe I'll just showcase a little bit of what I'm talking about right now. So if you really look at your hands, and I believe it's pretty similar between males and females, is they usually have little, what are those called, like peach fuzz hairs on the first knuckle. above the first knuckle, not directly on the knuckle. So I'm going to grab my hairbrush. Slightly draw on some hair. If there's areas that go over the crack of the knuckle, what I can do is just use my eraser tool and erase. Or if it's like too far down, I'm just erasing it. Even a little on the thumb here. And then you could even get into the area of the wrist where you see some of that arm hair kind of start to show. So I'm using a hairbrush, which is found on, this is also one of the Concept Cookie brushes. And I guess it's something else where every time I do a live stream or every time I do a tutorial, I'm only using the brushes that are found on Concept Cookie. Because I think I would be a hypocrite if I told you guys to download the specific set of brushes and then not use them myself. You can kind of see how I went outside of the hand outline, but we know that we can just mask it out. And you can see how I'm trying to keep the hair direction a bit irregular, where you don't want it to be all in the same direction. You want it to be kind of in the same general direction, but you want to keep it a little more irregular to keep that realism sense up. So on a new layer, I'm going to fully focus on hairs that kind of go outside of that layer mask, or outside of the outline of the hand. Then I'm not going to mask it out. I'm going to keep those visible. And then I'll erase more of the area inside of the hand, like this. Like that. And now you can see like there's areas that I still even want to clean up further. Like down here. So then I would just use my blending techniques and like keep blending it out. You know, grab my skin brush, my circle hard edge brush, either one would kind of do the trick. But I guess I'll kind of keep blending and then we'll finish up the questions here. So if you have any last minute questions, ask them now and we will get to as many as we can before we will cut off the stream at 3:30 Central Time. So in about 12 minutes we will stop streaming. Oh, am I still sharing my desktop?
Yeah.
Forgot what tab I put that in. There we go. Alright, so yeah, Joe, you can rapid fire on me.
Okay, these are actually, a lot of them are from Yetel.
Okay.
It says, do you make various sketch ideas before you do an artwork, like different perspective or positions?
Not as much as I should. I think that definitely can help you see a different perspective on what you're drawing and give you a different idea of what you could go about doing to create a more interesting piece. So I would recommend doing that as much as possible. This is one of those things where it's like, do what I say, not as I do, because I'll probably make like 1 to 3 different sketches of the scenario I want to draw out, and then I'll run with it.
So if a well-detailed hand takes you an hour, a well-detailed character must spend a few days?
We gotta remember, like, I'm usually not drawing individual wrinkles on a thumb for a full character. It's all about your, what's that called, your relative scale to what you're viewing. So for a character, the hand I would probably make a lot more simple, but I would still try to add in details that give the impression of detail, or of like fine detail. But a character admittedly does take me about 8 to 10 hours if I want to do like a full, well done rendering. Now, when I'm doing an illustration, that usually does take me longer, just because then I have to do like the scene around the character, and there's like 3 that I currently have on my back burner where they're just taking me forever, just because I spend too much time with finer detailing where I need to keep moving.
How do you establish fee in your artwork?
Feet?
Fee. I'm guessing they're asking how do you charge people for your art?
Oh, I actually got yelled at by Psychro's friends for when, because I told them about when I first started, and my rates were pretty low, like low enough where it was insulting. And I think other artists, then it's harder for them because then they'll look at my, pretty much what I was told is you have to be able to look at your work and give it a price point that actually matches the quality that you're going to be giving the person. So starting off, I will admit I did undervalue my own work, and I can see now how big of a problem that is. So realistically, you need to look at your work and be like, compared to other artists, make sure you're not like crazy high, because I think going the complete opposite direction is also misleading. But I do want you to kind of be like, okay, am I worth, like for example, am I worth $100 for a commission? And that's where I was putting myself kind of toward for a character. And I was thinking about it. I was like, well, if I'm putting about 10 hours in it, that's about $10 an hour. So it's about the same as working almost minimum wage. So you have to look at, is the amount of work that I'm going to be putting into this worth the price that I'm asking? That's the second probably biggest part of it. So yeah, just know it's not an easy, like this is for sure how much you should be charging, but just try your best not to undervalue yourself.
This one's gonna probably have to be saved for another time. It says, can you guys both give us recommendations for professional portfolio?
For like how to create one,
I'm not sure.
or is it like they want an example to reference from that we know? If that's the case, I do have a few that I could probably spot out really quick, but if it's the other, then yeah, that would probably be another live stream topic altogether.
Yeah, I would just spot out a few, just in case.
The one that for sure when I is my friend Nubia. I thought her website was like dynamite when she first made it. So hers is, and this is the girl that I worked on Eat Sheep with. We went to school together. We were always each other's biggest competitor, which I know I kind of mentioned before in past live streams, but like try to find an art group or some kind of person that can not just look at your work and be like, oh, that looks good. You want someone that will like, this sounds kind of negative, but like really rips your piece apart and really looks at it and looks at all the bad and then tells you exactly how it is. Because having that person, and for me that was Nubia, and for I can't be thankful enough for her opening my eyes to the things that were wrong in my piece. Where I've heard too many people tell me it's good, but that wasn't really helping, or that wasn't making me a better artist. If anything, that was making me more complacent with my own skill level. So I think having that person that keeps pushing you and tells you this doesn't look right, and then gives their reasoning or their criticism, but have it be constructive, is so important. But yeah, her website I think is dynamite, and I think you should check it out. And keep it to the point. So like for your own website, like make it easy to look at your images and have it be easy to look at from one image to the next, because that's what the employer wants to see. They don't want to know your life story. They just want to see your work and whether or not your skill level is worthy of being a part of their team. And then they'll bring you in for an interview, and then they'll get to know who you are. So initially, just to get in that door, you just need your work to kind of open that door, and then it takes you to walk through it and give the impression of who you are as a person.
Christopher Wilson asks, where did you look for jobs when starting out?
Well, it's kind of funny. So while I was in school, I got a freelance job at the company was called Golden Helicopter, and I was making iOS games. and the one that I mainly worked on was called Rigfire, and that one kind of found me through my friend. Uh, that one I didn't really look for, but I remember I got denied a lot. I got denied at there was what was that studio called? There was a studio in downtown Chicago, and they were holding like an open open tryout type scenario where like me and like 7 other AI kids at the time went on a train to Chicago, and we brought our portfolios, and they only hired like 2 people, and I wasn't one of them. So it was kind of my first taste of rejection and how to kind of move past it and be like, okay, well, I wasn't strong enough. Let's keep pushing what my portfolio represented at the time, and hopefully we can do better on the next one. So then by the time I graduated was the time when like I was all ready to do all my searching, and my portfolio show is when Wes Burke, who works at CG Cookie, found me, and since I had some step-by-step on how I created my art in my portfolio, he gave me a chance at that portfolio show. And I've been working with Concept Cookie ever since. It's because I think I like the job, so I would never quit it. So I never really had to search for a job. They came for me for the most part, and then uh, I think it was WMS. No, it wasn't WMS. I forget what it was called, or maybe it was Warner Brothers. I think it was Warner Brothers, and they were the ones that rejected me at the time. And that was the only time I like actively searched for one, and I got denied. So I think it's a good lesson in how to be told you aren't good enough, and then be able to work with that, not let it destroy you. Because I think that's where your own kind of personal strength will come from, is when you're told you're not good enough, and then how you react to that. Okay, I think I'm kind of done with this hand. We're closing up on the stream. Are we good, Joe?
Yeah, we're good. I'll save the other questions for later.
All right. So I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. I hope this maybe taught you guys something about how to draw a hand. And for the exercise, please take a look at it. Let me show you my results that I've kind of been working on the past day. So I have to do all 9 of these line art ones. Oops, there we go. So I've been doing step-by-step on how I do each of the hand or the creature features, and hopefully you guys will kind of take the challenge on for yourself. And Friday is when we'll do the updated exercise post on that. And as I mentioned earlier, the workshop will be announced on Friday for registration, and that is something, oops, where did it go? Which is this. And this is definitely something that I'm excited to get going again. So if this is something that interests you, stay tuned for that. We have another book review on Avatar, The Last Airbender, the first collection of the art of the series. So that will be out on Friday. And I think that's the big thing. Oh, and then our YouTube page. So if you're someone that likes to watch and follow people on YouTube, we finally got our YouTube page cleaned up, and it's all organized and categorized, so you can definitely watch our videos on there. So that includes our free tutorials, our tips, and our live streams with guest artists. And I think that's most of the announcements, unless if there's something I'm forgetting. Joe, can you think of anything off the top of your head?
No.
All right, perfect. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and that's -5 GMT if you're in the world. And next week, we'll probably do something a little different. I'll announce it on our Facebook, DeviantArt, Twitter, and Tumblr page about 3 hours before the live stream. But I want to thank you guys for coming and for asking some really good questions. And yeah, we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Right.
See you guys.
See ya.